that we call supplements that have nothing to do with proteins, fats, or carbohydrates, vitamins, or minerals. Things that are known to have very potent effects. There's a reason why the National Institutes of Health has a division now simply for these types of studies.
Right.
Things like ashwagandha can potently reduce cortisol. Shouldn't be used long term, but in the short term, this can be very beneficial for people, especially late day, because late day peaks in cortisol, not good for us. We know this, correlated with depression, anxiety, insomnia, which then has a cascade of negative effects. Things like creatine, not just for, we think creatine muscles, and indeed, it brings water into the muscles and make you stronger. Most of the data, clinical data on creatine, are to enhance forebrain function. It's
it's a nootropic.
It's a nootropic. It post-concussion, post-surgery, postpartum depression, headache. I mean, fish oils. So there's this whole category of things that, in theory, you could get from food, but the volumes that you would have to eat and the sourcing is just impractical. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. I mean, there's rhodiola rosea, which is, reducing cortisol. There's interesting data on that. And then there's the stuff we've talked about before about hormone augmentation. But for the typical person out there nowadays, I think they're thinking about, well, what can I do? What can I eat? How can I take better care of myself? Am I magnesium deficient or not? Probably not. But will taking some additional magnesium help me sleep? Yes. Will it hurt me? No.
Well, are you magnesium deficient? Get your blood work done.
Right.
Like, if you want to find out that, get your blood work done.
Everyone should have their blood work done.
But what I was curious about, like, why you were saying that it's just expensive urine. Like,
no. This is what other people say.
Right, but they're wrong.
No, this is what, when I was young, I got into this, training and supplementation early, and people would say, oh, it's just expensive urine. Don't spend your money on that. There are certain things like within supplementation, also the foundational supplementation, as I call it, like things like athletic greens, right? Or I guess they call it AG1 now. Things that are in such combinations of herbs and plant-based compounds, like you can't take them one by one. And then other things like magnesiums for sleep, or inositol and the data on depression, or inositol and insulin sensitivity. The number of people that are out there who are pre-diabetic or type 2 diabetes, of course, they need to exercise and eat right, but things like inositol can improve insulin sensitivity.
What is inositol?
Inositol it's similar to a vitamin, but it works in a pathway that makes cells more insulin sensitive, which is good. So you can use the glucose and insulin that you make, so you're not overproducing insulin. Type 2 diabetes is essentially overproduction of insulin because your cells aren't able to use the insulin that's around, so you crank out more of it. Type 1 diabetes, lack of insulin from the pancreas. That's why people have to inject it who have type 1 diabetes. So things like inositol. I mean, and the list just goes on and on, And so to me, I think the view is changing, I hope, that the idea previously was that, before the pandemic, frankly, was that supplements are just kind of like nootropic that, or, it's kind of, you don't need it. I'm not saying you need it, but they are a powerful augment to good sleep, good nutrition, good training, good social connection.
Yeah, if you want to optimize.
If you want to optimize.
The idea of needing it, like, what do you mean, to exist?
Right.
You could eat McDonald's and just live. Like, if you want to optimize your health, right. Supplements are very beneficial.
Very beneficial, but I think for you and me, it's a duh. But I think for a lot of people out there, they seem to think that there's something unique about prescription drugs that makes them better than supplements.
Well, that's because they've been lied to. Yeah. I mean, that's the real problem, is that the corporations who control these prescription drugs and sell these prescription drugs and sell advertising on television have got it into people's heads. That's why it was maddening when I had Peter Hotez on the podcast, and he was talking to me about the importance of vaccination. And I said, do you exercise? How do you eat? Do you take vitamins? And there was zero going on with him. He goes on walks occasionally. No. I mean,
physicians are
fucking junk food. He wasn't taking vitamins. He told me that some internist told him to take vitamin D. So he took that for a while. I'm like, for a while?
Yeah, vitamin D seems to have made it through the chute, like where anyone will take it because it doesn't seem scary to them or something.
Well, there was a recent study that talked about people that died or were hospitalized from COVID, and they could have prevented somewhere in the neighborhood. See if we can find this. It was a very high number. A very high percentage of hospitalizations and deaths could have theoretically been prevented with vitamin D supplementation. This was based on the number of people that were in the ICU that were deficient from deficient from vitamin D, that were in the hospital for COVID, and it was in the high 80s, or in the low 80% rather. And then they did this study showing what would have happened if they had just supplemented vitamin D.
I mean, I know many physicians
Here it is. New study reveals vitamin D in the body can significantly reduce the risk of severe outcomes for COVID-19.